All right. Good afternoon. How's everybody? The energy is fine. Can I suggest something? Can I ask everybody in the room to, I know it's going to be a lot of effort for that time of the day. Can we just move all in the middle? We just everybody move in the middle, please. أنا عارف مشوار وهنقفل الكمبيوتر ورايحة من الصنبورة وجاية من الصنبورة. يعني just move to the middle. Let's get together. We have a good crowd. ها؟ مش هيروح مش هطير موبايل. تعالوا هنا بس. Let's move in the middle so that we can just talk to each other. Okay, so we have a great panel today, and we're talking about building a solar. أنا عارف والله بس يعني نعمل إيه بالظروف. All right. So we're talking about how to build a solar civilization, and this panel is about solar energy. And if you guys are a bunch of technicians and engineers or people who want to build the next solar energy company, then we would go in a direction. But I want to go into a different direction where I want to ask you the personal questions. What about solar energy for you? What does that mean for you? How many of you have solar energy solutions in their own house? How many of you install solar energy in their own housing system in any capacity? Show of hands. Show of hands. 1, 2. Of course, we're going to understand why now. Kosa, fasad. All right, so we have 2 people, 2 out of the crowd. Okay, so how many of you would like to? Okay, how many of you would like to, but they wouldn't do it right now because of the cost? Show of hand. It will cost me too much, not right now. Okay, it's not really the cost that's going to stop me. I would like to do it, but it's not really reliable. Show of hands. Solar energy is not reliable. Okay, solar energy is not sustainable in sense of equipment. I mean, I'm going to get the equipment, I'm going to spend money on it right now, but it will not be sustainable for me as a household. Show of hands. Okay, see, these are all reasons that a lot of people find solar energy sometimes challenging. We live in a world that's built on fossil energy civilization. That's the civilization we're in, fossil energy. We've been talking about solar energy for the last, I don't know, 30, maybe 40 years. A lot of solutions came up. A lot of the things that are very, for the lack of a better word, sexy right now have been there for some time, but people have been very hesitant to use it for so many reasons. A lot of challenges that are localized. Everybody talks about challenges in solar energy from one place to another, depending on the environment they live in. Well, sometimes we have the sun, but we have a lot of pollution. We have the sun, but we have the sand and the dust that would prevent the panels from working. And then you have the biggest thing, which is the political will to actually invest in such a thing. And then what do you do with the other corporates that are working in energy? But we are in a moment right now that is globally and specifically in Egypt, where solar energy is back on track. A lot of things are happening, and we are on the process of doing this. We have an amazing panel today, where I will be asking them just very few questions, and I will let them have the time to talk. And I would like to do this a little bit differently. I don't want them to talk, and then you guys ask questions. We have a small number. Let's get the best out of this. So let's keep this as interactive as possible. These guys will have a minute or 2, each of them, to introduce themselves, what they do, a little bit of what they want to share. I'll ask the questions, I'll give them the round, and at any point of time, if you have a comment, you'd like to make an interaction, please raise your hand up. Is that cool? استبينا؟ اوكي، أنا مش حاسس بحماس. استبينا؟ أنت قاطع تذكرة في فيلم تاني مثلا في حتة استبينا؟ Okay, does anybody know what's استبينا? Okay, so it's a word that's used that means it's okay. The source of it is stabian. So it's good. Okay? Egyptians can do a lot with languages. All right, so our first speaker over here is my very good friend, Agamemnon. Yeah, and Agamemnon is a great guy. I mean, after this session in the evening, this is the guy you want to have dinner with, have some shisha with, have a lot of fun with. He's crazy and at the same time full of good work, amazing inspiring stories, and at the same time he has one of my favorite names ever. So, Agamemnon, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Okay. My name is Agamemnon. It's Agamemnon Otero, and I set up community-owned solar energy projects over social housing blocks in urban areas, so in cities like yours. And we run social works programs alongside that. So what that means is that it's cooperatively owned, so they're all owned communally, and we do training courses for over a year in an area. So you learn about the finance, the IT, the technical, legal, PR, marketing elements of your own localized energy power station. Then you own, manage, and run it. And you're paid to learn how to do it, and then we do it. So we set up and run those things. I have 7 different companies that do, some is tidal, some is solar, but that's where I am. And I'm really excited to have this discussion. I think there's a lot of rich things that we can go back and forth on.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rami Khurshid. I work for Future Energy Corporation. I'm a marketing manager there. Just one company, not 7. But we are renewable energy infrastructure developers. And our main focus is on working in frontier markets. So we work in markets where the fundamentals are on the brink of becoming competitive with fossil fuels. And in that sense, it's been a really exciting journey with Future Energy Corporation that's taken us from Egypt and the Middle East as an Egyptian company to Latin America and the Caribbean, where energy prices are much more favorable for renewable technologies. And just a couple of points on the introduction, just to get conversation going. I think the first thing that I wanted to say is that when there's a couple of people, I think in front row, who had an issue with solar technology reliability, that upfront is categorically not an issue. You know, that's something that I think it's an opportunity for us to dispel that sort of notion. The second notion that I want to dispel is that, and this might be a controversial opinion, is that I don't think Egypt is on track at all, actually, in terms of solar technology and where it needs to be. You're talking about a country that, on a global level, has one of the highest solar irradiance levels that any country has. And that said, in terms of, I mean, when we asked who has solar panels on their house, no one raised their hands, or maybe we had. So we had Yassine at the time, right? So at the moment, it's not really a market, and actually a lot of work needs to be done in order to reach that point, and that's kind of what my job is, and that's what I work on every day.
I'm Yassine Abdel Ghaffar. I'm the managing director of Solarize Egypt, and we're a solar technology company that's pretty self-explanatory. We're trying to solarize Egypt. And what we're doing is that we believe the reason why solar is not widespread has nothing to do with the economics, because the economics tell us that the levelized cost of energy in Egypt is 38 piastres. If you look at what you're paying residentially, it's more than 84. That means the price is almost 2.3 times the cost of what you're buying your energy at from the grid. The reason why we haven't been successful in making the country solar is that the solar companies tend to focus on just selling their products, and we should really look into the other industries which have the marketing muscle to push forward and disseminate this kind of technology. So everyone here put their hand up when we said it's expensive. But what if solar was coupled with some kind of banking solution where you're paying for your solar over 7 years and you're getting the benefits of the economies but without having to go for the capital intensive aspect at the beginning? This is exactly what we're doing. Today you can buy solar from us, 0 down payment, pay for it over 7 years. Ultimately, we're moving towards something called a freemium model, where you install the system without any cost, and the installment for the bank equals your savings. This is something that's an inclusive business model, and this is what we're trying to do, to focus beyond certain trends which are favorable for solar right now, and focus on a more sustainable and long-term approach to taking this forward, to the technology forward to the next level.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a good introduction. But before you move on, I have a question for Rami. So you've been to Latin America. You've been to Latin America. You've been into countries in Latin America? Yeah. Which countries?
So we were in Brazil and in Jamaica and mainly the Caribbean.
This question has nothing to do with the panel, okay? Absolutely. This is a personal interest question. Just trying to find out where this guy went. So you've been to Jamaica, Brazil. That's so cool. We're going to talk after we finish this now. Yeah. Now, my question to you now, that's a very good introduction. Rami, I want to pick up from your comment that you don't think that we are on track. What are the elements that you think would put us on track into building that civilization? And when we talk about civilization, we're talking, I mean, we're in Alexandria right now. I was just talking to the Mammon before we start, and we are in Alexandria. We're talking about civilization. It takes a very long time. There were some obstacles. And with your reservation, what are the elements? My question is for the three speakers, and let's start with Rami. What are the elements that would make the building of that civilization on the right track? Before we do that, if I may, my own perception. Right now, for example, I think we have one of the obstacles that is there right now, that there is some kind of at least public political will to support that. The point that you just meant, I mean, as I said publicly, the point about having banking systems that actually contribute to that, these things there are some steps that are going there already, and this is that. So you're thinking about solutions now. So Rami, you want to start off with what are the steps or the element that will help in building the civilization, and how does it look like?
Okay, so the first thing I want to do is kind of adjust the mic and make sure that everyone, so is this a good volume level? Okay, it's very difficult to gauge from here. Okay, so the first thing that I think is important is to think, very realistically about the economics. I mean, I know Yassine has mentioned that in terms of the numbers that it makes sense, but I think if that were true, if it was a direct comparison like that it was actually half of the price, then everyone in here would make the immediate decision to install on their houses. And that's not actually the case if you look at the numbers. And I think, banks are willing to finance solar projects as they have throughout the world, and I think FEC has also established a track record, for example, of doing this in our other markets where the economics do make sense. And we're looking at this from the position of a company that has tried and tested this model and will do it once it makes sense in this market, but at the moment, the economics of it don't make sense. So what are the economics of it, and what are the components that we should be thinking about and the factors? So first off, you have so we talked about demonstrated political will. So you have the feed-in tariff program, for example, that came through, and the first thing that I think is important to note is that with the feed-in tariff, which was ratified, I believe, in 2013, only two checks maybe have been issued since then. I think Yassine is a proud receiver of one of these checks. So it's great that one of them or both of them have been issued. But many more systems have been installed under this program, and people are still waiting on their checks. So it's kind of ridiculous that you have a law that was passed in 2013, and since then people have been waiting for the checks that they need under this law.
So the political will is not really executive.
It hasn't been executed, right? And you can carry this forward in many other areas in terms of actual implementation.
All right. So Yassine, do you want to take a shot? I can see it in your face, my friend.
I do agree with Rami on one thing, that the feed-in tariff is not the best thing. It's just intended as an incentive scheme to get the technology rolling, and it's not what we should depend on for the technology to be sustainable. But I totally disagree in terms of economics, and the reason why we've been able to sell projects and we're expanding since 2013 is because more and more people are realizing that it's possible. And the issue in Egypt is related to the cost of capital, because the banking sector looks at solar just like you would look at an automotive loan or a personal loan, and they would give you a ridiculous interest rate like 22%. But once you start accessing funding from financial institutions, which use Egyptian banks as intermediary banks, and you can lower your interest rates like we've been able to do to 2.5 and 3% on the EGP, then you have a whole different ballgame, and that's when the ball gets rolling. And that's the thing with solar and with these kind of technologies, is a very small change in a certain aspect can really change the entire economics. And we've actually gotten requests recently. We're working on 2 500 kilowatt plants in Egypt, and this is the first of its kind on the feed-in tariff. And a lot of the people are realizing that actually there is value to be added. And 1st of July, we have the next subsidy increase. If any of you are aware, the Egyptian government has a law which has been enacted, and we have a 10% increase in electricity prices every 1st of July until 2018 and 19. So this is when we really get our business. July comes in, your bills go up even higher, and you start looking for alternatives and solutions. But I really think the issue is nothing to do with economics. What we've been trying to do recently, and a lot of people are also doing the same thing, is that solar is not about solar, okay? You talk about solar, you talk about having it on your rooftop in a villa, probably. If you live in an apartment, then it might not be the best thing for you. And we tend to find a very big disconnect between the solar energy companies and real estate developers, for example. Why? Because maybe the aesthetics of solar don't fit with compounds. But if you're able to tackle that, if you're able to look at it in a multi-dimensional way and decide, okay, what if I can bring in red solar panels that look just like rooftops? Then you have a game changer, and then you have the residential developers lining up, asking you for those panels. This is what it's about. We have a new technology here. It's not about capitalizing on market share. It's about creating the market. This is why it's tremendously exciting to be able to be part of this.
Great. Now I think that would be a good way to go into Agamemnon because your projects are working pretty much not on the villas and the compounds, you're working on a very different level that is affordable for a different economic or socio-economic level. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Then I move to the audience, I promise. I've seen a couple of hands. Let's listen to Agamemnon first.
No, I think culturally, I mean, like when you talk about civilization, you talk about, what is it to be civilized? And I think both of what you guys are saying, I think, are cutting to the heart of this. But actually, it's not being argumentative to either of you guys. It's actually just pointing out that if we look at it from another way, the reason why we all started using phones was because it became very helpful for us to get our point across, right? The reason why every one of you guys is not looking at us up here and looking down at your iPads and your iPhones right now is not because you don't care what we're saying. If you didn't, you would have left, or you would have, or you're just still here because you're working on something else right now. And it's comfortable, your seat's sort of warm and it's got a little bit cold in here. But like the reason why you're still here is because you're actually trying to connect with us to someone else. You're actually trying to be a connector right now. You're telling somebody about something that's happening here.
Let's mention you. What's your tweet handle?
What?
Well, let's mention you. What's your tweet handle?
Agamemnon Otero. At Agamemnon Otero. No, but my point is this. The moment that we all can be a part of solar, right, is the moment that it becomes a solar civilization. And when we talk about it as financially viable funding structures and whether or not the banking loan rate is going to be accessible for developers to do that in this portion of that portion of the country, you're not accessing the global market of a solar civilization. The way to do that would be to include individuals who have a roof, who've rented a roof, or whose mom owns the house whose roof is over them, and they go, okay, well, I want to own a part of that. And I think what we need to talk about is everything has gone into a new sort of funding structure. 12-year-olds are paying their own phone bill, right? And so is the grandmother is using, she's going online and searching on these new platforms. What we need to do is have people able to buy into this system. So those two structures are difficult for individuals. I think a lot of the young people here don't own their own home. So what we've been trying to do, and I think has really changed the whole culture in the UK around this, is setting up community energy projects where you allow local people to buy in from £1 to £50. And the banking argument is that it's very hard to service a individual investor. But we know already that that's bogus because all of our platforms, you can drop in for 50p. You're part of things with these things. So there's big investors who will make big returns, and there's on their money, but everybody will make the same return. So I think if we want to have a solar civilization, we have to think about a civilized funding structure that gives reasonable returns over a reasonable amount of time and allows everybody into it, regardless if they have a roof over their head. Because the majority of the space in Egypt has no roofs on it. It's just amazing big chunks of sand that could be covered in panels. And the other thing I was going to say was that when we talk about solar, it's not just the blue bits of stuff on the roof. You can have passive solar. It's about the way you build buildings. It's about solar thermal. The best savings is solar thermal, heating your water, right? You can have massive cooling towers that have solar integrated into them. So when we're talking about civilization, let's think about all of the civilized things that we do with our structure, with our education, and how we could build it into roads. So that's my bit on.
No, that's very interesting. Now I have a question for the audience before we carry on. How many of you right now, when somebody's speaking, you actually visualize things. So if I'm talking right now about food, what about pizza? Imagine now a hot pizza coming out of the oven, stuffed crust. It's so good with the cheese. Can you picture that? Okay, I like the cheese part. I just like the cheese part. Now, but what you did right now, whether you like it or not, whether you're hungry or not, your brain is visualizing it, right? Now, while the gentlemen over here are talking about this, how many of you are visualizing homes with panels on the top of them, solar energy? Are any of you visualizing solar energy panels in a farm or above a factory, massive industrial building? You're not. That's the point that I want to move in. We're talking, most of our talks right now has been on the civilian or the household activities, solar activities and solar applications for houses, but also when you build a civilization, we're talking about factories, farms, pumping, a lot of other applications that are very important, not only economically, but also environmentally, and for many other reasons. So I would like this to be our next take to the speakers, but if it's okay, because I promised the audience we'll get them engaged. And I'm not going to look at the audience right now because there are two people in the audience who are organizers. They're probably looking at their watch right now because we're about to run out of time, but I'm going to tell them that I will totally ignore the screen with the time, and I'm going to take my time, and whoever's coming next has to come and carry me away. Good luck with that. All right, so 1, 2, and okay, let's take these two, Jen.
Thank you, Shahab. Thank you, gentlemen, for this excellent panel. I have...
Just a second, guys, let's keep it for 30 seconds.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Okay, is it photovoltaic technology? Yes, okay, this one. To scale up business, what is your competition? What is your direct competition or indirect competition? I need answers from Rami and here in Egypt because every country has its own circumstances, has own conditions. So for you guys, I need to know what is your competition.
So I can take a part of the
preventing you
the
to scale
question.
up business.
I don't know, was the question on factors that prevent scaling up, or did you mention
Challenges or competition?
just competition? Competition.
Competition.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
okay,
competition
so in
not just in
terms of-
solar energy, but competition in other forms of energy.
To come across the competition to scale up business,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, 100%.
So,
in-
Rami and Yassine, you can talk about the competition. Do you mind if I just take the second question and then we build on that? Well, you want to go ahead? Let me just... يلا طالما تحمست الإجابة مش هتفك يلا انت حبيبي برضه راجل قاعد مستني مخصوص ما رضيش يسافر يعني.
So basically, you're competing with the government grid. That is your single biggest competitor. And up front, you know, the competitor in Egypt, when I was talking about how Egypt is not ready for solar at the moment today, that competitor is losing money. And no technology in the world can beat an entity that is actively losing money. And the Egyptian government is actively losing money on electricity through its extreme subsidies. So that is your first and foremost competition. The other second form of competition are the segments that aren't reached by the national grid. So you're talking about people who are off-grid, whether farms or small implementations in distant areas. Those, I think, are the...
Not competing against the convenience.
Yeah,
Convenience. I think you are competing against the convenience for me to change to solar because
so you're competing against the convenience. Is that competition or a challenge?
actually I think that you are is competing or this kind of technology is competing against the non-consumption because
Okay.
I have the convenience save at home just pay.
Let's hear Yassine. Yassine, you want to do a comeback on this?
Yeah, I agree with Rami here that the number one issue preventing it is the subsidy, because without the subsidy we're easily competitive. But if you look at agricultural rates, for example, you're talking about 20 piastres per kilowatt hour. This is practically free electricity. I agree, but when you're talking about the segment which the subsidy is not extremely impactful, then you already have a business model. In cases where you don't, then that's your major competition. And your second point about convenience is actually solar is very convenient because we access the existing grid. So all it is that we're installing it in a way where it's not disruptive to your lifestyle, directly to your connection, and your home sees it as its primary power source. You only take your additional power from the grid if you would require so. So this has already been taken care of, and what's being done is consumerizing and commercializing solar instead of losing the sexy aspect, as Shahab mentioned, and asking people what's your kilowatt and kilowatt hour rate and start going into technical. It's all about making it commercialized, maybe having a widget online or just asking how big is your house, and that's a simple question. From that you can derive it and tell them this is how much you'll pay per month, this is how much you'll save, and the product is relatable to the client. This is our major challenge.
Okay, now I'm going to give the mic now to Agamaman because he has a comeback for this, he has a rebuttal for this, but at the same time, he's working with masses, so if you're talking about inconvenience, I think he has something to add here. Please.
So 95% of global capital is tied to fossil fuels. So all the market is being funded by the fossil fuels. When I was coming here, there was all the refineries that you guys have in this country, which are all being subsidized. But it's not just the subsidies for the energy generation and all the backup generators that you have, it's also all the cars. It's all based on fossil fuels. And so there's vested interests. The way the financial markets work, if everybody divested right now, there isn't enough renewable energy in the world to take the financial instruments. So the whole global financial markets necessitates us not taking up renewables. The half-hourly metering that are throughout America and everything, it doesn't work when you look at renewables. If you put us on a yearly metering, and you looked at it, there would be a round of generation. You can put up backup storage. With a 60 gig backup, the UK could be fine on solar and wind, but it's only when you think about it in half-hourly segments that you need, and that are only built with nuclear and fossil fuel to create a baseline, that it becomes not workable. So you're fighting a structure. We're in a company, and so just to give you an idea, the UK's bill is £1,370 per person on average. They pay for energy. £500 of that is subsidizing fossil fuels. £37 is subsidizing renewables. And the market went bananas. The government, the Tory government in the UK, came out and said, green crap, it's wasting money, it's spending all this good consumer money. Actually, what it's doing is it's destabilizing a global financial market, which is all the instruments have been made to subsidize fossil fuels.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question from the lady, and we need to wrap this up within the coming maximum another hour. That's maximum. We can.
Okay, Yani, thank you for your talk, actually, but you mentioned that Egypt is not ready. I see the opportunities now, actually, not in the future. Yes, my name is Riha Fula. I'm certified international marketing professional from Georgia State University and certified in customer relationship management. And actually, I work in training and development, okay? But now is the opportunity, actually, to implement these programs. But if you seek for getting fund from banks, it will not happen, actually. Because the problem in Egypt is that we haven't investment bank. No investment bank in Egypt. We have a lot of commercial banks. And here is the issue, actually. So if you would like to start implementing this program, you can depend on integration between different investors, like investment club and direct investment in these actions. Here is the solution. And for 20% higher in electricity prices, actually we get leverage. Each $1 in gas price increase, for example, iron cost with $14. So it is not just in electricity, in cement and everything. So, okay, thank you. No, it's okay.
What's the question?
You have a question or just comment?
No, just comment and.
All right, that's great, May.
Because we can just talk after.
My question is really relevant. I'm not sure what kind of customers are you guys selling to, but if you're working, is the government competing or is the government a customer? And at the same time, how are you guys as startups competing with the big guys that decide to go into the solar and they work with the government and make use out of whatever the government is doing to subsidize breaking in?
I think it's an excellent question. And the issue and what we need to clarify is that we're not competing with the government simply because the government is operating at a huge loss. So what's happening is that they're taking fossil fuels almost for free from the Ministry of Petroleum, putting them into the system and still making a 20 billion EGP loss every single year. So they are extremely happy to see someone step in and to take away these losses from them. So that's why the ecosystem is encouraging of that. This is why they've removed all customs on products which are coming from abroad related to solar. So a lot of things are happening because there is a political will, because they want to push this forward to decrease their losses, because we're very far from having a profitable Ministry of Electricity. So this is lucky for us, and this might not be the case in the future. Does this answer your question? And there was a second aspect.
The second aspect, yes, partially, but the second aspect is, for example, like the big companies that, for example, like Rosneft, they decided to build solar energy.
How do you compete with big companies deciding to go into that business?
And the government. How are you guys as startups working with that?
There are
So
several
they're coming
things.
in with the big money. I mean, you're starting with like 100,000 pounds, they're getting in with 100 million.
Okay, the thing is, or the edge that you have as a startup is that solar is very customizable. And when you're a startup and you can come in with a disruptive business model, you can actually go and have the financial depth to go to the clients that these bigger players would not go to. Bigger players and construction companies would look towards something like the feed-in tariff, where it's a set contract with the government. But what we're able to do as a smaller company is that we're able to understand the specific energy needs of each client and to build specifically for them a financial model which makes sense just to them. For example, we were working with one of the universities and they're paying maybe 86 piastres per kilowatt hour and they have no interest in owning a solar plant. So what we did is we talked to them and told them, you don't have to own it, we can invest in it, and we can make a contract that you're buying power from us instead of the government at 80 piastres. So they won without any investment, you're saving 6 piastres. This is something that we can do specifically for each client to be difficult for the larger players to do that.
Okay. Now, Rami has something to say in the Nagamaman, but Rami, before you say what you want to say, I have a question for you. You still want to disagree with the idea that this is an ecosystem that encourage? I mean, he brought up some interesting points. Do you still have an opinion about that?
I mean, I think it's a little unclear as to, I mean, you can interpret an ecosystem that encourages solar in many different ways. What I'm talking about is that.
Okay, the political system, I mean, or the
Okay,
policies.
I think there's a disconnect because I think at the end of the day, the government, you know, without getting too political, is capable of passing laws and not executing them because the government itself is an entity that is comprised of many different interests and of many different capacities, and that at the end of the day, what I'm talking about is you know, de facto what is happening is you have rules and regulations that would encourage renewables that aren't in place, for example. And I'm talking about specifically in this case the feed-in tariff. There's another thing, you know, that I want to shed light on, which I think answers your question regarding competition with, you know, the big companies. And I think there's nothing really to fear there, as evidenced sort of by the past year. And I think if you were to segment the market into three portions, essentially, you talk about the microgrid solutions, which is what I talked about before, which is completely off-grid for sort of implementations. You talk about the residential and commercial sector, where again small companies have an advantage in terms of matching consumer needs and matching the right product to the right customer. And then on the big scale projects where you'd think they have an advantage, they actually have a lack of advantage in terms of experience and expertise in picking the right program. So Yassine and I were actually talking about this before we came on stage, that there's a massive program under the feed-in tariff as well, just the final point of 50 megawatts. So you talk about the $75 essentially $1 million investment that we qualified for as a company as well, and Yassine's company as well was involved in this. And we withdrew at an early stage, realizing that the program was not going through at the rate that it was supposed to. And a lot of the big boys are still in this program losing money because they haven't worked in this field for long enough to identify that this program wasn't going to go through.
I think that there's, like you talk about civilized, and then there's uncivilized. So effectively when people, when we're talking about getting everybody to be able to invest in something and be a part of it, they have to have the right to be a part of it. So the big companies that are coming in, so like in the UK, it's very similar to all over Europe, they have the 96 to 97% of the market for fossil fuels. And in the last 6 years, the UK alone has gone from being 1% renewable energy generation of its total consumption to being 25% this year. And it outperformed coal and gas this week, twice. And the interesting piece there is that 99% of all the new renewables are owned by the big guys. So they're doing is they're changing their asset base, they're changing the asset base from fossil fuels to the renewable. They're buying the asset class, so they're buying the manufacturing, they're buying the big steel. So what I would actually put to the table, and I would say in response to your point about where we can go and how can this be, there's a huge opportunity to to invest in solar individually and to own it. Egyptian people should own and be part of their solar civilization. And they should own it. Because if it's just an asset transfer from the big corporates to take the fossil fuel industry to move it to the renewable industry, but then still own energy, it's ridiculous. Because wind, tidal, and sun power are actually free. We really shouldn't be adding on that extra bit. So I would say there's a really big opportunity there.
Thank you, Gaman. I wish we could stay longer. I know there are a couple of questions, but yeah. See, that's why usually I'm very good with body language. I make sure that when I speak to an audience, I maintain eye contact with all sides of the room. So I go like this, like this, like this. But in this room, I stop here. You guys know why? Because there's a very fine, pretty young lady over there who's staring at me like now. It's like. So I'm just going to avoid this by not looking at her. Yeah, I'll deal with it when I get out. So, I mean, I wish we could take more of your questions, but let me just do one more thing before we leave, and I'll build on where Agamemnon ended. I didn't introduce myself when I walked in here. I work in, I mean, I have several hats, but the thing that I'm really passionate about is conflict resolution and negotiation, and I work with people and their behavior, and I work on many things. So what is this guy doing here? And a solar energy panel. I also work with a great NGO for a while, a social enterprise incubator called Nabd Bahrousa. Great. I've seen a lot of changes that are happening through a lot of amazing, inspiring stories. And I really believe that impact can be done through the small ideas and the small things that are happening. So I decided that some of my investments will go into different directions. So currently I'm investing in 2 energy companies. And my technical knowledge is not really as good as these guys, probably none compared to you, but I want to build on this. It's for free. Facebook came up with a design for some kind of, well, I don't know what they call it, like this glass that were 360, 3-dimensional thing, and it was a great thing to do. And what they did is, they invented it, that was like just less than 2 months ago. They invented it, and what they did, they uploaded the designs of what they manufactured. So they designed it, they didn't sell it. They took the designs, they uploaded, and they said, you know what, guys? Anybody can download them, anybody can take these, anybody can manufacture, it's yours, it's for free. And they're smart, because when you do that, you're gonna use more of their products. So the idea is, how can we take these? I mean, this is not a question for you guys to answer, but this is a question for all of us. How do we move from big businesses buying assets to manufacture more solar energy, and small businesses trying to compete and come up with good ideas and more popular ideas? And how do we move into a citizen, an individual, realizing that this is free energy for him, saving him the environment and saving him money and getting into something else? How do you do that? 2 things. One, there's a lot of work and a lot of part of the vision of the new companies and the startups should go in that direction, which is empowering people. And this is the idea that I want to leave the audience with. Now, the decision or the idea of solar energy, and I'm assuming everybody in this room is with the level of intellect and education of knowing and understanding and thinking about it, but not necessarily doing anything about it. Now, what I want to leave you with, what is your personal choice as a citizen of the country and as a human being about your life right now and about the future? What do you want to do about this? Do you want to know from these guys more about what do you do and how can you help them? How can you develop something? Do you want to try and take the risk and invest money to do this in your own house, maybe in your own business, promote for these ideas, teach your kids about it? Do you want to do something about it individually? Because once you do this as a group of individuals, you will help every single one of those. Not only the 2 young Egyptians over here who are doing a great, amazing job, but this guy over here, he's willing to help you if you come up with a question, if you come up with an idea. He'll fly across the world to help you with this. All you need to do is to have the right question or to have the right idea and to invest time in it. So the question right now doesn't just end with the policies, and I agree with you, not with the government, not with the banks. I want to end where Agamemnon ended. It ends up where, are you as a customer willing to work with them and help them produce something for you or not? So I'll leave you with that question, think about it, and I apologize for keeping you for a little bit too long. And thank you very much. You guys are a great audience, and I'll see you sometime very soon. Thank you for the audience. Big hand. Thank you very much. And Agamemnon is hungry, so we're probably getting some fish today for him. All right, so anybody have any suggestions, please? Thank you.